attack. And to kind of give you a little bit of a heads up as to where we are going, it's hard to believe, but we are getting closer and closer to Christmas. And so in 2 weeks, on the 27th, we're going to be starting our Christmas series, which is called Countdown to Christmas. I know as a kid growing up, I always loved having an Advent calendar. Who am I kidding? I still love Advent calendars, right? I mean, it's like you just get finished all the chocolate of Halloween, and then you've got Advent calendars where every day you open up a little window and you get a little box of chocolate or something along those lines. But we want to do a little bit of a countdown to Christmas as well. Now, hear this clearly. We are not going to be delivering chocolate to your door every day, okay? We're not going to be doing that. What we are going to be doing is having a bit of a countdown where every day there's going to be a reflection on the theme of that week as we get closer and closer to Christmas. And so the way it's going to happen is three ways. One is you can get an email, and so if you're already signed up for our weekly email, nothing you need to do. You're going to get a daily email where it's going to be a reflection, there's going to be an image, there may be a song, there may be a, hey, give this a try. So that's one option. Second option is if you're a fan of Facebook, you can check out our Facebook page every day, and there'll be the same reflection posted to our Facebook page. And what we're hoping is that you'll be able to interact and engage in that as well with us. Third option, if you don't do email, you don't do Facebook, we are going to have old school hard copies of it as well, weekly at every door. Okay? And so it's a way for us to experience Christmas together. Because here's the reality. Christmas is probably the busiest time of the year. Any disagreement? No? No one's going to admit it, right? It's busy, it's sometimes stressful, there's just lots of things going on. And I think that's just the reality of it, right? I mean, I think the reality is Christmas is a busy, crazy time of year. The very first Christmas would have been off the charts crazy and busy because everybody had to pack up their family and return home for a national census. And so Mary and Joseph had to pack up their life and head on to Bethlehem. And so you want to talk about busy, you want to talk about stress, it was right there 2,000 years ago. And so instead of kind of guilting people, and we're just going to own it and say, listen, it's a busy time of year, but what we want to do in the midst of the busyness is to say, how can we reflect again on just the reality of Jesus? And so that's coming up in 2 weeks. And so we hope you will not only join us on Sunday mornings, but you'll also join us on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday as well, as we reflect upon what God is doing in the midst of the busyness and the craziness of life. We good? All right. Let's jump back into our current series on heart attack. And if you're just joining us, it's been a series where essentially we've been asking the question, what is the condition of my heart? What's going on really within my life? Because one of the realities of culture, one of the realities of church, is that oftentimes we like to fall into the trap of appearing as if we have life all together. We appear as if we have no issues, we have no problems, but deep down inside we know there's things going on. And that's what Jesus wants to have a conversation with us about. If you read through the ministry, the biographies, the Gospels of Jesus, you see time and time again Jesus engaging people in this question. Because Jesus knows and understands that what is going on within is eventually going to leak out, and that is truly who we are. And so we've asked the honest question of, do I have issues of anger? Do I have problems of jealousy? Do I struggle with guilt? And so hopefully it's been a conversation where we can start to identify some of the symptoms, some of the realities, so that when we notice an issue going on, we can actually address it. We can actually own it. And to say, I have some work to do here. Because Jesus understands what the abundant life is all about. And when we start to get our hearts right with him, it will not only impact our life, it's going to impact our relationships with others as well. And so we're just going to simply have these conversations. And so this morning, we're going to pick up on the last issue, the last, at times, challenger that goes on within us. And I'm going to be real honest. This is probably, perhaps the toughest one. This is probably the one where we are least likely to own because of just the ugliness of it. I mean, we can say we have issues of anger. We can say we have issues around jealousy. We can say we have issues around guilt, but it's this final conversation that is going to make us probably a little bit more uncomfortable, because it's probably going to hit us where sometimes we don't like to talk about. And so we're going to jump to this passage, and just as Harold comes up to read it this morning, we're going to turn to a passage in the Gospel of Luke. It's Luke chapter 12. If you have a Bible, open it up. If you have your phone or your iPad or anything else, swipe there. If you don't have a Bible, just grab one of these, and we're going to be landing on page 74. Luke chapter 12 on page 74. I say this every week, right? If you don't have a Bible at home, what are you allowed to do? What, did I hear steal a Bible? Absolutely, steal a Bible, do whatever you have to do. Put it in your wife's purse, put it under your husband's jacket, blame them. We want people to be able to have a Bible at home, to be reading it. We're restocking it every week as necessary. But we're going to turn to chapter 12, and just give you a little bit of a context. Jesus is having a conversation with his disciples. So the 12 guys that are closest to him, and thousands of people are gathering around Jesus. They're actually told that people are almost trampling one another because they want to hear what he has to say next. And what Jesus does is brilliant. He has a conversation just with his disciples because it's probably such a sensitive topic, but he does it loud enough so that everyone else can hear. And what Jesus is talking about is the very thing this whole series has been about, the concern around hypocrisy, where we appear one way, but something else is going on within. And Jesus says, be aware of hypocrisy. It starts as just a little bit, but then it grows and it grows and it grows, and pretty soon it completely takes over. And it says Jesus is talking about hypocrisy. A guy in the crowd just totally interrupts Jesus. It's like just totally breaks the train of thought and has a problem and an issue. And that's where we're going to jump in. So if Harold, you want to read the story for us, we're going to hear what was so important on this guy's mind that he had to interrupt Jesus, and then unpack it for us here this morning.
This morning's scripture reading is taken from the Gospel according to St. Luke, chapter 12, reading verses 13 to 21. Hear the word of God. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Friend, who set me to be a judge or arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take care, be on your guard against all kinds of greed, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." And he told them a parable. The land of a rich man produced abundantly. And he thought to himself, "What should I do? For I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this is the very night your life is being demanded of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So it is with those who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich toward God." Thanks be to God for this, his holy word.
We see the situation where Jesus is teaching about hypocrisy, and then right in the middle, this guy is like, oh, Jesus, I I've got an issue you need to solve, which is not uncommon because in Jesus' day it would be typical to go to a rabbi for advice, to go to a rabbi to help them solve a disagreement or an issue. And here we see there's an issue over the family's inheritance. Interesting. That probably never happens nowadays, right? Never happens. Right? See how relevant the Bible can be so often? What happened 2,000 years ago, people worrying about their stuff. Jump in today, and we're still talking about it. And so what's the final issue we want to look at here this morning? It's what Jesus takes head on, not only in this passage, but so often as you look at his ministry, the issue of greed. The issue of greed. Now, talking about greed and talking about our view of our possessions, our view of our money, our view of our stuff is a challenging topic to discuss because it gets incredibly personal. It gets to a place where suddenly we're like, hey, whoa, let's shut it down. Let's sing a song. Let's take the offering again, but let's not talk about it. Right? And for me, in my life, anytime I'm sensitive about something, I often take a step back and say, well, why is that the case? Maybe I should be more aware of this because of my sensitivity to it. Because what you notice is Jesus picks up on this right away because he begins by telling a story of a man who has an incredible year. He has an incredible harvest. And notice Jesus doesn't talk about the amount, he doesn't talk about the harvest, but rather what Jesus addresses is his attitude towards it. And so it doesn't matter how much you have or how little you have, money can be an issue in our life. Because Jesus continually wants to ask and continually wants to know, what is it doing to you? What is it doing to you? Because you notice what Jesus does? The guy comes to Jesus with a, tell my brother, tell my relative to give me what is mine. And you notice what Jesus doesn't do? He doesn't say, well, bring in the other guy. Let's figure this out. Let's talk this through. Tell me your story. Tell me why you deserve this. No, Jesus doesn't even deal with any of that. It's like if the question is here, Jesus talks over here and he says, watch out, take care, be on your guard against all types of greed. What? Jesus, tell my brother to give me my stuff. What? Watch out? What? I'm the one being ripped off over here. Come. And what Jesus so often does is he takes a circumstance and a situation that we kind of want him to side with us on, and he turns it back in, and suddenly we're the ones having to reflect upon our life. And you're thinking, oh, okay, what's going on? You see, because I love the words that Jesus used. He says, watch out, be on your guard against, not just against greed, but against all types of greed, all kinds of greed. You see, I think greed is a tough one to deal with in our life because greed loves to play dress up. Loves to play dress up. I'm not going to ask anyone here if they like to play dress up because you're all old enough and you should have outgrown that a little bit. But when you're a kid, right, you love to play dress up. You love to play pretend because you know on the outside you're wearing one thing, but inside it's totally different. And greed loves to play dress up. It loves to slide into our life, appearing as something else, when in actual reality it's starting to get its hooks on us. And I think there's a couple things that we can identify here this morning. And this is why Jesus is continually speaking about this issue, because of the danger it can place upon us. the danger it can put us in, the distance it can pull us further and further away from God. And so I just want to identify 3 ways that greed, that money can often dress up in our life, that can cause problems, that can oftentimes sound a bit of the alarms for us to take a better look at this. And then we're going to conclude by just how do we undress greed? How do we just expose it for what it is so that it's naked and it flees away from us? The first way, greed often dresses up in the statement, well, come on, I deserve this. I deserve this. You know, I worked hard for this. I earned this. I put in my hours for this. I saved for this. You see, so often we get into a place of thinking, you know, I deserve this. And that's exactly the place where this man is coming from who comes to Jesus. He says, basically he's saying, Jesus, settle this dispute. This guy is not giving me my share of the inheritance. What is he saying? I deserve this. I deserve this. And what is Jesus' response? Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. And so maybe one of the questions we start to look at is saying, if in our life we're constantly saying, no, I'm not overspending, or I'm not overbuying, I deserve this, is this an opportunity to have just a little bit more self-reflection? A second way I would suggest that greed often dresses itself up is in the comparison trap, right? We say, I'm not greedy. I don't have too much. I have a handle on my possessions and on my wealth because look at so and so. They got a nicer house. They got a faster car. They go on cooler vacations. They wear nicer clothes. And so we always start to compare and to say, I don't have an issue. So someone else I know might have an issue, but I don't have an issue. See, if you're like me, comparison works really well when you look up. What about when you start looking around and seeing some of the other people around you? Well, I don't know why I don't do that, right? I compare myself to other people and think, all right, you know what? No, I don't have an issue. Money doesn't possess me because I don't have as much as so-and-so. But you live a year in Malawi? Wow. Starts to change perspectives. Starts to remind me that maybe I've got a lot more work to do than I thought I did. And so these are two of the ways that can often dress itself up. I think the most subtle way that money and greed can dress itself up is in worry. Until I read this passage in the full context, I missed it. Because notice what Jesus does. He starts out on a topic about hypocrisy with just his disciples. Then a guy interrupts him about his possessions, and he deals with the issue of greed. That's for the whole crowd. And then he pulls back in his disciples again, and what does he talk about? Worry. He totally changes direction and says, listen, don't worry about what you're going to eat. Don't worry about what you're going to wear. And then Jesus pulls out, in some ways, just absolutely ridiculous illustrations. He's like, look at the birds of the air. Look at the birds of the air. They eat enough. They're provided for. God is like, Jesus is like, won't I provide for you? All right, I get your point. She's like, no, I'm not done yet. Look at the lilies of the field. Look at all the beautiful flowers and how just smartly dressed all of them are. Won't I clothe you as well? You're like, oh, come on. Right? You see, worry can creep into our life because we say, I'm just careful. I'm just thoughtful. I just want to make sure that I have enough. And this is why so often it's hard to identify it in our own life. We can see it in others, but we don't always see it in ourselves. I'll give you a real basic example. A couple weeks ago, my kids went out trick-or-treating, and they brought in a lot of candy, right? They had like a bucket full, right? And I go over and I go to grab some of their candy. Probably should have asked. I teach them that, but hey, there's a lot of it in there. And they're like, whoa, what are you doing? What are you doing? You can't have that. I don't know if you can have that. And I'm just like, what are you talking about? You've got like 10 pounds of candy over here. I got nothing. Help me out. And my daughter wrote a sign. Please don't touch or I'm going to tell mommy. Dad, especially you. The truth still hurts. The truth still hurts, right? And that's just such a small, minor detail. But then I take a step back and look at my own life. You know, are my worries really legitimate worries and concerns, or do I find myself in a place of actually trusting in God? That He is the one that is going to provide. Because Jesus ends this entire conversation with a rather interesting statement. In verse 34, He says, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." You see, Jesus talks so much about money, so much about possessions, not because He needs our stuff, but because He wants our heart. And He knows likely one of the greatest competitions for our allegiance and for our devotion is possessions, is our stuff. Because we'll dress it up and make it look all pretty to make ourselves a little more comfortable. But Jesus just lays it on the line and says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. You see, the subtlety of the story that Jesus tells, the issue isn't in how much stuff the guy had, but rather what his stuff was doing to him. You see, the conversation, he says, I have all these things, so now I will build bigger barns. I'm going to tear down my old barns. I'm going to focus on myself so that I will now have enough. I can sit back, I can eat, drink, I can be merry. It's all about me. And what we start to realize is why Jesus identifies this is because Jesus wants our focus not to be simply on ourselves, but rather upon others, and ultimately upon Him. There's so much at stake that it's as if God says, this is such a key issue. I want you to trust me that I dare you to trust me with this. I dare you to trust me with your stuff. And how do we do that? Ridiculous generosity. Intentional, consistent, ridiculous generosity. I think the way that we unclothe greed in our life is by going above and beyond and giving in a way that we're like, oof, I don't know. Not because God wants our stuff. You know, Jesus tells us this, not because He wants something from us, but because He wants something for us. And He knows what is at stake. Absolutely, when we give to the church, when we give to charities, many people are helped and incredible things happen. But incredible things happen in our life as well when we say, I'm going to derobe this greed in my life. And God says, I dare you, I double dog dare you. Because it's such a big ask. Have you ever been there where someone dares you to do something and you're like, no, I don't think I can do that. I don't think I can do that. Like, oh yeah, I double dog dare you. All right, gauntlet's been thrown down. Let's do this, even though it's like beyond my comfort zone. I have to admit, I have to confess, I've eaten some ridiculously disgusting things in my life because of Double Dog Dares. It's just, you think I would outgrow this. I've eaten things that I just shouldn't have eaten. That's what happens when you live overseas for too long, right? People like, I dare to eat that. I'm like, I don't even know what that is, but all right. And here I stand. Well, I thought I outgrew it until about a couple weeks ago. I was out with some buddies who I play hockey with, and we go out for wings, right? You probably know where the story is going. Right, we have a good night out, we're eating wings, trying different flavors, doing this, until finally the last batch comes out. And you want to guess what flavor it is? Blow your mind. Hot. And it comes out like you can almost, like my eyes were watering just by seeing it, and I'm thinking, oh, come on, Joel, this is not a good idea. End your night well. And all the guys are thinking the same thing, and they're looking around, and they're like, oh, I don't know, this is not a good idea. Hey, Joel, why don't you try one? No, I'm good. I'm kind of full. They're like, you're a liar. I dare you. I'm like, all right, here we go. And so I managed to choke one down along with multiple napkins to wipe away the tears and the burning and everything else. I'm thinking, come on, man, what are you thinking? What are you doing? My understanding of Scripture, the one time that God throws down the gauntlet is in giving. He says, I dare you. He's like, test me in this. Try me out in this and see what will happen. It's in the book of Malachi, the very last book of the Old Testament. You see, what was happening was God's people, again, were focusing too much upon themselves and not giving back to God, not because God needed their stuff, he wanted their heart. And God throws down the gauntlet and says, test me in this, try me in this, and see what will happen. It's the very same thing that Jesus is saying into our lives as well. Will we be willing to trust in him? We sang that song, I want to trust in you. And one of the practical ways that I am constantly being challenged in my own faith is in my giving. Because that is one of the real practical ways where I say, God, I'm going to trust you in this. And so Rebecca and I make it a habit where we talk about our giving, where we make sure that we're intentional, we make sure that we're consistent, and we make sure that we give in a way that stretches us, that makes it a little bit uncomfortable for us. Because we believe that this is oftentimes the place where not only we see great things happen, but God becomes even more real in our life. One of the benefits I've noticed in intentional, consistent giving is worry has gone down. I worry less. I compare myself to others who have more a lot less. I don't get bent out of shape and think, well, why don't I have more? You see, the amazing thing about Jesus is when he speaks about the abundant life, it's not about how much stuff we have. It's about how much we're willing to trust in him. And the reality is there. But it's not in the knowing. It's in the doing. It's not in the knowing, it's in the doing. And so this week, I've just left you with a couple questions to consider. And ask yourself the question, is greed playing dress up in your life? Is it? Just be honest about it. Just own it, because that's the place where Jesus wants to start the conversation. Second thing to ask, and this is a tough one, is ask yourself, what do you value? What do you value in life? And then does the way in which you use your stuff truly back it up? Because I can fall in the trap of talking about a lot of things that are important, but does it add up in terms of the way in which I give, the way in which I spend, just the reality of all of that? And then consider a next step. What is something that can happen? I love this quote by Kerry Newhoff. He's a pastor just north of Barrie. He says, increase your standard of giving before your standard of living. Jesus wants our heart. He wants our heart. He doesn't need our stuff. But so often he needs to break through it in order to get us into a place where we are truly his. And so when we give, it not only has an incredible impact upon others, but it brings about transformation in our life. And so will you trust in him? Will you trust in God to provide? Because one of the best pieces of advice I've ever been given happened during premarital counseling. When the pastor says, you know what? You can never outgive God. You can't outgive God. The course of history has proven that. What I have to ask is, will I step into that and make it a reality in my life? Because what Jesus wants is that we can all say, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. And so why don't we stand together and sing that hymn together, reflecting upon